Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Nicole, and are you ready to see the books that I hauled? I guess that's what we're doing today. I'm going to talk about the books that I have hauled between January and March, and I'm pretty sure you'll be seeing this in April. So yeah, I've got a nice little stack of books to show you. Usually I do monthly book hauls if I'm hauling books, but for some reason, I think I was feeling special in January and thinking, wow, I really didn't haul that many books. I can wait and do them later. And then I got partway through February and I was like, girl, do it now. So here we go. I'm going to share with you all the books that I've hauled up to the point that I'm filming this is basically how it's going to go. And I'm going to go through them by genre, starting with the one work that was a recommended book. I have some nonfiction. I have a little bit of fantasy adjacent reads. I have a whole bunch of sci-fi. What else do I have? Oh, and like some lit fiction, historical fiction, something along those lines. These are loose categories, like don't hold me to them. So I'm going to start with the first book. This is a book that I went to a lovely bookstore in the St. Louis, Missouri area, and I had a wonderful conversation with the person who was working at the bookstore that day, and I could tell that they had really interesting reading tastes and that kind of thing. And so I not only had them help me find a book, but then I also asked them to just recommend me any book, like their favorite book that they've ever read that they think everyone should read. And so they were really excited and they did that. And to my pleasant surprise, they recommended to me The Little Prince, which I have never read. And they said they absolutely love this book. I have heard of it before. I know a lot of people like this book. I don't tend to read a lot of children's fiction, so this is different for me, but I have read some children's fiction and some middle grade. And again, I've heard that this is one of those books, kind of like Peter Pan and Bambi, that is in theory written for children, but reads, for all ages, if you will. And there's beautiful pictures and there's this nice copy. And yeah, I don't know. I am just excited to finally give this book a try. This is about a pilot stranded in the desert who awakes one morning to see standing before him the most extraordinary little fellow. Please, asks the stranger, draw me a sheep. And the pilot realizes that when life's events are too difficult to understand, there's no choice but to succumb to their mysteries. That already sounds really fascinating and very deep for a children's book, but we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. It reminds me a little bit of some of the ideas of what goes on in The Alchemist, so we'll see whether or not that's correct, but I'm looking forward to getting into the story and seeing what the fuss is all about. I went back and forth about whether or not to include my nonfiction on the list. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I tend to look and go through a lot of books that I buy as just reference books that I have no intention of reading from beginning to end, like cookbooks or books that are on like reading or books that are on books, that kind of thing. So I have bought one or two of those, but I'm not going to share those. I'm just going to share the nonfiction that I do plan at some point reading from beginning to end. So the first book that I'm going to share is a book that kind of goes along with a book project that I had at one point that I thought I had brought to completion. And that was a book project I was doing on Nat Turner. It started with the book The Confessions of Nat Turner by William Styron. It continued on with my reading In the Matter of Nat Turner. And then when I was in Chicago at a bookstore, the Seminary bookstore, I think that one was, I found this book, which was more recently published, which is Nat Turner, A Visionary History / Black Prophet. Or maybe it's Nat Turner, Black Prophet, A Visionary History. I think that's probably the order it's supposed to go in, but the way it looks on the cover, kind of hard to tell. And this says in August 1831, a group of enslaved people in Southampton County, Virginia, rose up to fight for their freedom. They attacked their enslavers in the homes and attempted to march on the county seat. So that is talking about what later becomes known as the Turner Rebellion. And then Nat Turner, Black Prophet, I was right, that was the order, is the fullest recounting to date of Nat's uprising and the first that refuses to downplay or ignore his divine visions. So Nat Turner's Confessions are a historical document that you can look at. And if you go to read it, it's not very long. It's available to the public. I will link it in the description box below. You will find that in that document, he talks about divine visions that he received that led him to leading this rebellion. And apparently this book isn't going to gloss over those and just ignore them in its entirety. I don't know how exactly it's going to bring them into play in full, but I am really curious and I'm excited to continue my journey in reading more about Nat Turner and his confessions and what people think about him, because there's very little that is known about him outside of this document. And basically the vast majority of the rest of what's known about him has mostly been left in oral tradition. So I'm excited to see what new research this book may be bringing to the forefront. Having come highly recommended, and I decided that I finally needed to just read this book, especially in light of everything that is still going on in the world and seems like will be never ending, is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. I feel like this book has been talked a lot about on book media, especially given that it is nonfiction. I feel like nonfiction doesn't always get as much love as fiction does. And I don't know that excited would be the words that I would use to describe this book, but I am really intrigued and concerned, and I don't know, I want to read this. And if you don't know what this book is about, I will just read like the first little paragraph of the blurb, which is basically what I've been doing with all of these. It says, on October 25th in 2023, after just 3 weeks of the bombardment of Gaza, Omar El Akkad put out a tweet. One day, when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anyone accountable, everyone will have always been against this. This tweet has been viewed more than 10 million times, and he goes on to talk about exactly what he meant by that statement. And I think it's a statement that could continue to be used regarding so many situations, but I'm interested in hearing specifically about this one. Okay, the next two books that I have are somewhat reference books, but are also books that over a long period of time I could see myself reading in completion. I mentioned that I will buy like books that are about books or books that are about reading. I really enjoy reading about literary criticism and how to analyze a book and how to critique a book and that kind of thing. It's just something I enjoy for some weird reason. So one of the books that I bought along those lines is called The Well-Educated Mind, A Guide to the Classical Education You Never Had. Now, this book does talk about the classical education, like homeschool model, but how to approach reading in that model from an adult viewpoint. That's not actually what made me interested in this book. What I really liked about this book is that she gives very like concrete ways and ideas on how to approach a text. In this case, she's talking about classic works of literature, but it really works for any literature that you're reading. And the thing that I also like about it is that it uses the Socratic method, which is asking yourself questions to help you sort of come to your own ideas about what it is that you're reading. And so I really like this approach. I originally borrowed this from the library and read probably a good third of the book and liked it enough that I decided to pick up my own copy so that I could have it long term. Going along with that same idea of classic literature and reading classic literature, I had bought this book called Great Books, My Adventure with Homer, Rousseau, Woolf, and Other Indestructible Writers of the Western World. I have recently become aware that there's apparently this whole huge movement of people, particularly in the US, who are obsessed with like classic literature, particularly in the Western canon, as they call it. That's not why I want to read this book. This book is about David Denby and his experience going sort of back to school to Columbia to retake his classics classes and to see like as an adult, does he appreciate them more than he did in college and what his experience was going back? And given that I've spent about the last year doing a rereading of high school works, I thought it would be kind of fun to read about somebody's experience of redoing college in some ways. So that was actually my interest in this book, but it was something that I found out about from, having searched up The Well-Educated Mind. Like eventually, you keep reading about great books of the Western canon, and this was one of the books that came up, and I said, ooh, I'd be interested in reading that one. I have three books that I feel like fall into the genre of fantasy, though they're not like your high fantasy or typical fantasy books, I feel like, that you see people talk about. One of them is called Kokun. Cocoon? I should actually look that up because I'm realizing I have no idea how that's actually pronounced, and I don't think it actually explains anywhere. Okay. And subtitle is The Girl from the West. And this is put out by Europa Editions, which is a publisher at this point that I really trust. And it is the first volume of a sweeping fantasy by one of Japan's most beloved storytellers and the best-selling author of the Moribito series, which I've never heard of, but that's just me. The vast Umal Empire has flourished for centuries thanks to the miraculous ohale, I'll put that up on the screen, rice, a sacred grain brought from a distant land by the first empress Kokun. Resistant to all parasites, the rice has sustained the empire, ensuring peace and prosperity for centuries until now. When a mysterious infestation strikes, famine spreads, and the empire begins to crumble. And so you follow the story of actually a young girl and her journey as the empire is crumbling, and there is this rice famine. And my understanding is that this is a fantasy story, but I'll find out for sure when I read it. I do want to also clarify that clearly, because this is a book haul, I have not read any of these books yet, but I like to share because it just gives you an idea of what's coming up and maybe puts on your radar some books that you yourself might want to, look more into, because you're definitely not going to get full information from me right now. Another book that I picked up is Call Me Ishmaelle, or Ishmaelle. I don't know how she's going to pronounce that, but anyway, this is supposed to be, I believe, a feminist retelling of Moby Dick. I personally really like Moby Dick, and I think it's interesting to consider a feminist retelling of it. I don't know that I would say that I truly consider this a feminist retelling, because I feel like it's a retelling that just inserts a female character into the story of Moby Dick, as opposed to looks at the story of Moby Dick and looks at and focuses on the women that were actually in that story, which aren't a lot, but there are some. And they have backstories I'd like to hear about. That's not what this is. This is just I feel like almost a fan fiction version. Like, what if there was a woman involved on the crew of the ship, the Pequod? I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting. I have read Moby Dick and I want to learn more. I think that's all I'm going to share about this book. I could tell you more of the details, but if you haven't read Moby Dick, they might not all be that helpful. I'm really interested and curious to see what someone does with that plot in a very different manner and way and different perspective and all those things. I should add that I do know that the woman in this book, she goes onto the Pequod-like ship, or the Pequod, whichever it is, but she does dress up as a man, or she disguises herself as a man to do so. So that will also be an interesting sort of twist to the original tale. The next book that I got is The City of Dreaming Books, and this, I think, was just fulfilling my little, I love people who love books and books about people who love books and books that are about books and all that kind of jazz. If you like books, you already know what I'm talking about. And this says, Optimus Yarn Spinner, already love the name, has inherited from his godfather an unpublished manuscript by an unknown writer. He sets off to track down the mysterious author who disappeared into Bookholm, the so-called City of Dreaming Books. Yarn Spinner falls under the spell of this book-obsessed metropolis, where an avid reader and budding author can find any number of charming attractions. Get this: priceless signed first editions, salivating literary agents, and 4 hire critics. But as he pursues the trail of the missing author, the darker side of Bookholm begins to unveil itself. Cold-blooded book hunters, fearsome cyclopean booklings, sharp-toothed anatomes, and of course the Shadow King, whose howls rise from the deep beneath the city at night. Will he survive his quest into the world where reading is a genuine adventure? Love it, love it, love it. Love the idea. Hope it comes together and is as awesome as I imagine it being in my mind. But what's not to like about puns, an adventure story, fantasy world that is all book related? I'm ready for it. Okay, and that doesn't segue right into sci-fi, but we're going to go there anyway. So I have recently, I would say over the course of years, but really especially the last year, realized that I really enjoy science fiction. And not only that, I have become more and more familiar with the type of science fiction that I like. I don't know that I'm familiar enough with it that I could name it yet, but I know it when I see it, if that makes sense. So I did pick up quite a few science fiction works, and I'm excited about all of these, and they will definitely be being sprinkled in throughout my reading year. So the first book I picked up is a short story collection, which is very unusual for me. I don't tend to read a lot of short stories, but in the last couple of months, I have figured out how to work short stories in my life and how I like them. And I had figured that out by the time I purchased this book. And that book is Portalmania. Let's just talk about how amazing this cover is. I was also assured while buying it that the book itself is as good as the cover. So that's always nice to know because it is a book that's tempting to just buy the cover buy. Let's not deny that. Anyway, in Portalmania, Debbie Urbanski wields sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and realism to build a dark mirror that she holds up to the ordinary world. Within the sharply imagined landscape of this collection, portals appear in linen closets, planetary gateways materialize in boarding schools, monsters wait in bathroom vents, and transformations of women's bodies are an everyday occurrence. And I just like the idea of a short story collection that every story has portals in it. And I can't wait, honestly. Like, I might not wait. I'm curious. So earlier this year, I read The Ministry of Time, and I wasn't thrilled with it. And while I was reading it, I had a couple of people recommend a different book, which then when I went and looked at reviews of Ministry of Time, I noticed other people also recommended as being a book that covers similar themes and ideas to the point that some people thought the Ministry of Time had plagiarized it. That hasn't been proven, but it seems like everybody agrees this is the better version of the two, and that would be The Rise and Fall of Dodo. Now, I have read some Neal Stephenson before and just haven't gotten into it. I actually owned a used copy of this ages ago and was finally like, I don't think I'm ever going to read this. But I don't think I actually understood what the book was about, and at the time didn't realize how much I liked sci-fi. I've also been promised that this does not read like most Neal Stephenson books because it is co-authored by Nicole Galland, and she's got a great name, so I don't know. I'm hoping it works out. What is this about? I don't know, other than that it's supposed to be like Ministry of Time that has to do with time traveling. But I think in this one, like in the Ministry of Time, the time travelers are coming to the current time, and that's the time traveling that has happened. Does that make sense to you if you haven't read one or other of these books? The other thing that I noticed about this, because I was initially thinking I would just borrow this from the library because I'm not sure about Neal Stephenson, but it's Aragopic fiction. So there are different types and formatting of writing. And I noticed that I realized that sometimes I don't hold up the things that I'm showing to you long enough. But there are different styles of writing and different things going on in here. And I wanted to see that on paper and I wanted to have time to understand it. And it's a big chunky book and I didn't want to have to rush through it just to get it back to the library. So I bought it. That's basically what I was trying to say. That's my excuse. Okay. I also picked up Mickey 17. No, 17, Mickey 7. I'm really confused. This is Mickey 7. Why does it say 17 at the top? It says 7 on the side, so we're going to go with that, and I'll try and figure that part out later. Okay, I got it. Mickey 7 is the book that became the movie Mickey 17. Why they changed the number, I don't know, because that, like, clearly I already can't handle that. So, what is this book about? It says, dying isn't any fun, but at least it's a living. Mickey Barnes is an expendable, a disposable employee on a human expedition sent to colonize the ice world Niflheim. Wherever there's a mission that's too dangerous, even suicidal, the crews turn to Mickey. After one iteration dies, a new body is regenerated with most of his memories intact. After 6 deaths, Mickey 7 understands the terms of his deal and why it was the only colonial position unfilled when he took it. So I have read quite a few books that have to do with science fiction and AI or robots or something along that lines, and the idea of living and death and what it means to be human and to be alive and what it means to die. And this book sounds like it's going to cover all of those things. Plus there's a movie to go with it. So hopefully that'll be fun. And yeah, I've seen this around and really didn't care about it. Like the cover wasn't drawing me in until I read that description and I was like, oh, I love to read about that. So hopefully I love to read this. I also found this really fun looking cover of Local Heavens. This is a science fiction retelling of The Great Gatsby. Let me get the whole thing for you so that you don't miss out on any of the possibly amazingness that this will be. New York City, 2075, Filipino-American Nick Carraway has just moved to the heart of the fractured New Americas, where he's struck by the city's contradictions, shining corporate towers casting bleak shadows over the slums of a crumbling middle class. And then he meets an alluring Jay Gatsby. So, yeah, billionaire, sci-fi, Great Gatsby retelling. This, I feel like, could be great or horrible. I don't know which. I'm clearly hoping for the great. Since I just recently read The Great Gatsby in the last year, I'm really hoping to get to this before the year is over because I would love to see what is done by it. I know that the more common Great Gatsby retelling that people read is, what is it, The Bold and the Beautiful? Was that a soap opera? Whatever this book is that I put up on the screen. That's the one that everybody reads. That one, I believe, is more literary fiction, which is not always my favorite. Sci-fi tends to win it for me more often. I'll let you know. I'll let you know. Again, becoming more familiar with what I like in science fiction, I read and decided to pick up The Years of Rice and Salt. And this says it is the 14th century and one of the most catastrophic events in human history is about to occur, the coming of the Black Death. Today, history teaches us that a third of Europe's population died, but what if the plague had killed 95% of the population instead? How would the world have changed? Again, I really like science fiction, especially honestly when it takes place on Earth. I think that sometimes does really interesting things, but I like science fiction. I like the idea of it looking at like human events and like speculating on what if just one part of this historical event had changed. This reminds me also of Doomsday Book by Connie Willis, which kind of sort of ends up broaching a very similar topic and idea. I have read a lot of books that have to deal with the Black Plague, and so I think this is a really interesting and different like perspective to look at it from. So I'm really curious to see how that question is answered. And apparently I think there's like, yeah, I think there's different points of view that we end up getting to look at to see like how the world ended up different from this place. And if I recall correctly, I think it starts like from the Black Plague and goes into the future. It's a look at the history that could have been, one that stretches across centuries, sees dynasties and nations rise and crumble. Yeah, so it does more than just at the time of the Black Plague. Like it carries out this idea like well into the future. And I think that is really fascinating. At least I hope it is. Okay, so you remember what I said about Neal Stephenson not always working for me. Well, I was going based on the premise of the book, and I did read the first couple of opening pages, so we're just crossing our fingers because I picked up Seveneves, right? I think that's how it said. And this is a book that I've seen around and I've seen people talk about just like in terms of like how they were liking it or not. But then I read what it's actually about and I was like, oh, but I would actually be interested in reading that. So darn. And this talks about what would happen if the world were ending. And I was like, okay, sold. I those are some of the things that I like to read about and speculate on when I read science fiction. So darn. But it goes into more. Another catastrophic event. Do you see the similarities here? Renders the Earth a ticking time bomb this time. In a feverish race against the inevitable, nations around the globe band together to devise an ambitious plan to ensure the survival of humanity far beyond our atmosphere in outer space. I feel like this book is secretly the event that would happen before the long way to a small angry planet. Tell me if you agree. Like just about whether or not this would happen before. I have no idea about the rest of this book. Please don't spoil it for me. But yeah, again, looking forward to giving it a try. Oh, there's a picture. Ooh, it's a glossy picture. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm not going to read any of the words around that, but check that out. I mean, I don't read picture books, but it's fun when you occasionally come across one in your book. Okay, and then this one is probably going to be for me like my stretch on science fiction because it's falling into an area of science fiction that I may or may not like. I'm not a huge fan of space operas. Like, I do know that this one is set more in space, kind of, sort of, and seems like it might be going opera-y, though I ironically really like operas, just not in my sci-fi. And this is Infinity Gate. It is a series, which doesn't always work for me, but I did buy it used, so there we go with that. And it says the war for the multiverse has begun, which is probably the part that's going to take me out of the book. Because like, I don't want to read about war in space. I don't know why. That just doesn't appeal to me. So what is this one about? Infinity is only the beginning. The Pandemonium, no, I'm sorry, the Pandemonium, a political and trading alliance of a million worlds, except that they're really just one world, Earth and many different realities. That was the part that got me. And I was like, oh, darn, it's not separate worlds. It's one world in like all the different realities of that one world. Like the world in parallel universes is fighting the other worlds in other parallel universes. Okay, fine. And when an AI threat arises that could destroy everything the Pandemonium has built, or the Pandemonium has built, they'll eradicate it by whatever means necessary. And then you brought in AI. And then I said, okay, fine. Like, I'm just talking myself into the books. They're practically jumping into my cart. I don't know what to say. Okay, let me just keep moving on. Okay, the final handful I have here are books that felt like they were like historical fiction or literary fiction or something along those lines. So we'll go with those in no particular order. I picked up The Prospector, and this is a translated work of French, and let me tell you what it's about. It says, for as long as I can remember, the author writes, I heard the sea. On the island of Mauritius, the young Alex Lateng enjoys an idyllic existence with family, exploring and dreaming of treasure buried long ago by the legendary unknown corsair. But his father's But with his father's death, Alex must leave paradise and enter a harsh world. Years later, he is obsessed with the idea of finding the treasure. He abandons job and family, setting off on a quest to a momentous confrontation with the search that has consumed his life. I love a good quest story. I like the idea of going away and coming back home and being obsessed with treasure that may or may not exist and all of those things. And I've been trying to read and buy and purchase and just experience more books from around the world. And yeah, one from Mauritius sounded like a good idea. This Great Hemisphere is another book that I picked up. I will say that I do go to bookstores sometimes, and when I'm just looking for books, I will sometimes just look on at every single book on a bookcase because I don't know. If you just look at the books that you've heard about, you might miss out on something. And I feel like this is one that I haven't heard of, and that doesn't mean it's not well known, but I hadn't heard of it. And this is how I found this book, just by looking at every single book that was on this one bookcase. So it says, this is a rallying cry for anyone who has ever felt invisible. A powerful, captivating novel about how far we'll go to protect the ones we love and what happens when we resist the narratives others write for us. This immediately made me think of Native Son and Invisible Man, especially because it said the words invisible. And it says, welcome to the Northwestern Hemisphere 2529. And then I went, oh, wait, and it's also speculative fiction? Okay. An equally exciting and terrifying world born from the ashes of our own, where almost half the people are born invisible. They're born invisible. Like they're not even pretend invisible, they're actually invisible. And thus relegated to second-class citizenship, as you would be if nobody else sees you. Like, way to take the like symbolic and make it literal. I'm loving this. Sweet Mint, a young invisible woman, has done everything right her entire life, from excelling in school to landing a highly sought-after apprenticeship with the mysterious, powerful inventor. But all she has fought so hard to earn comes crashing down when she learns that her missing brother, whom she had presumed dead, is not only alive and well, but also a primary suspect of a high-profile political murder. So then you get a thriller vibe and something else, and I don't know, but don't you want to read this book? Because I know I do. Yeah, I'll let you know how it is after I read it. Also, when I was at the bookstore, I got this really gorgeous bookmark. There's the bookstore I bought it at. Anyway, yeah, I can't wait. This is why I play a game. There's like no way for me to choose on my own which book I'm going to read next. Okay, and then I picked up the 2023 long-listed book for the Booker Prize, In Ascension, which was one of the few books on that Booker Prize list that I went, oh, that one sounds interesting. But then at the time, I don't think it was out in publication here in the US. And then I forgot about it over the years and then read more other things off the Booker list and realized that I don't usually like Booker Prize winning novels. So the fact that this is long listed might do me well. This says that Lee grew up in Rotterdam, Let me try that again. This says that Lee grew up in Rotterdam, drawn to the undersea world as an escape from her unhappy home life and volatile father. A talented marine biologist, she joins an exploration team investigating an unfathomably deep vent in the Atlantic Ocean. She hopes to find evidence of the Earth's first life forms during her research dives, but what she finds instead calls into question everything we know about our beginnings. So I really like the idea of it kind of being sci-fi. I'm guessing soft sci-fi, I don't know, but I like that it is looking at like real life things in terms of like what we know about our origins. Is it real life? Is it going to get fantastical? I don't know. But the more I read about this book, the more, one, I'm like, no wonder it didn't win the Booker Prize, but two, like, wow, I really want to read it. So yeah. And then it also fits into a category of science fiction that I've wanted to explore more. I find that I tend to like science fiction that has more to do with like biology and bioethics and like all of that kind of thing versus the type of sci-fi that has to do with physics. So I'm hoping that's going to be the case with this book, and I think it'll be a book that I'm more intentionally trying in that area because of it. So kind of funny that I said we were in literary fiction, but the last two books are also kind of sci-fi. Whatever. This one is historical fiction and goes with my other obsession, which is Vincent van Gogh, and is called Saving Vincent, a novel of Jo van Gogh. And if you don't know, that was Vincent van Gogh's sister-in-law, basically. And in 1891, timid Jo van Gogh Bunger lived safely in the background of her art dealer husband Theo's passionate work to sell unknown artists, especially his ill-fated dead brother Vincent. When Theo dies unexpectedly, Jo's brief happiness is shattered. Her inheritance, hundreds of unsold paintings by Vincent, is worthless. Pressured to move to her parents' home, Jo defies tradition, instead choosing to open a boarding house, raise her infant son alone, and promote Vincent's art herself. And if you don't know the story of Vincent van Gogh, and specifically his relation with his sister-in-law and his relationship with his brother Theo, and how Vincent van Gogh's work came to be more renowned and really to become as popular as today, I'm hoping that this book is going to go more deeply into it. Now, I know the true story. I'll be interested to see how this is worked out in a fictional story. And ooh, are there pictures in here? No, there's not. But there's really pretty, like, divisions between apparently the time periods in the book. So I'm looking forward to this because I pretty much look forward to anything that has to do with Vincent van Gogh. All right, so that's it. Here's the entire stack of everything that I purchased so far this year. Like I said, it is significantly less than I have. Well, it's about the same as what I've read, and it's less than what I've unhauled so far this year in terms of books that I've read or refused to read at this point in my reading life. And I'm really excited to replace those with these. And I really hope I love each and every one of them. Let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, if you liked them, if there's some that you think I should get to sooner than others. Hopefully that'll happen in my random game. And that's it. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.